Hello, I'm Swifto, and today I shall be reading a silly little story which I have written myself called Lab Rats. It's about two young boys who go off and do all sorts of crazy adventures together in time and space. It is not exactly a serious story, it's just a little bit of fun, and I hope you get some sort of enjoyment out of it. This shall be the first part of Lab Rats, the whole story, and there shall be 5 more episodes to follow, this being the first of the 6, and this first part shall include the introduction, chapters 1 and 2. I hope you enjoy. An introduction to a whole other universe. There is a theory that there's an infinite number of universes. What would they be like? What if we could somehow create a peephole into another universe and observe that strange new frontier? Some theorise that these universes could be very different to what we are accustomed to in our own realm of existence. Perhaps the laws of physics work differently from our own universe, or perhaps they're so similar to our own that they are indistinguishable from each other. Perhaps they are alike to a certain point but diverge at a certain moment in time, forming 2 radically different timelines. Perhaps this alternate universe would be like our own, only the Roman Empire never faded from history and continued to reign strong for 1,000 more years. Or perhaps there's a universe even more bizarre than that, where I, your humble narrator, could actually come up with an original idea for each story. The possibilities are endless. But what if one of these alternate universes, like our own, was a vast black void speckled with an uncountable mass of twinkling galaxies? What if one of these galaxies were a splendid spinning spiral, a galaxy made up of many solar systems, with one in particular hidden away in one of that galaxy's outer arms that had just one sun, a star that had 8 planets orbiting it, an asteroid belt, and several dwarf planets also within its gravitational pull? This star would be very much like the one we would call the Sun. But this is not the sun that has given life to our planet. This is another sun, in another universe. Like in our own universe, the nearest planet to this star is called Mercury, and moving outwards is the planet Venus, and third from this star is the Earth. At first glance, we might mistake this magnificent blue-green orb as our own Earth. The land masses are much the same, with the continents of Africa, Antarctica, Australia, and so on. But one thing that's very different about this Earth compared to our own Earth is the large island situated almost in the middle of the North Atlantic Sea. This is Altiove. Not quite as large as Ireland, but large enough to have 4 cities, Altiove has a history going back thousands of years. For some unknown reason, the island became lost and forgotten during the Dark Ages. Little is known of Altiove during the medieval period. However, ancient records of a civilization that once thrived on the island survive, and much of that ancient culture's myths and mythology has been adopted into the culture of modern Altiove. The island was only rediscovered in the late 1500s, and since then Altiove, once ruled by the British Empire, has become an independent nation of its own and spread its influence throughout the world. A little north of the very centre of Altiove, just south of a vast forest and at the end of a narrow sea bay which reaches almost to the centre of the island from the east, lies one of Altiove's 4 cities, the city of Demonfield. Demonfield has been the site of many strange happenings, from the ancient legend of the Demonsfield Massacre, for which it gets its name, to the strange tale of the Night of Madness of 1935, when many of our citizens were inflicted by mass hysteria due to a meteor shower. But of all the strange tales that the citizens of Demonfield know of, none are as strange as the adventures of 2 young boys who once lived in the city. 2 young boys who would see and do things that most people could only dream were possible. This is the beginning of their story, of their adventures through time and space. It began in a dark and dirty laboratory on the 29th of December, 1999. Chapter 1. A Whole New Beginning. A boy with no memory slept soundly for a time he could not remember, At this point, the boy had no idea that he had no memory, for he couldn't remember not having memories to remember in the first place. If he had memories to remember, he might have been dreaming of those memories at this time. However, without memories to remember, he couldn't dream of memories he remembered. Instead, all there was darkness. There was nothing to see. He felt cold and could hear distant sounds from an origin he was unsure of. The cold and the dark made him feel very scared. Where was he? What was happening? These were some of the thoughts that entered into his now awakening consciousness. As he panicked, his heartbeat began to get louder and faster. The distant sounds became louder but not more audible. He began to shake from the cold as his heart became faster and louder. The noise became unbearable. He felt like the sound was tearing him apart. Faster, louder, faster, louder, faster, louder. And then suddenly, it was gone. Light. Bright shining light entered his world for what seemed to him for the very first time. The boy had no idea what was going on at first, but after a few seconds he then became used to the bright light, which now seemed dull in comparison to the brightness of the light just moments ago. Once his eyes adjusted to the light, he began to make out a shape in front of him. The shape was blurry. The boy had no idea what he was looking at, and it frightened him. The terrifying shape morphed before his very eyes. Then he recognized it. He didn't know how he recognized it, but he knew what he was looking at was a face. The face was of another young boy. He had bright blonde hair and blue eyes. He also had pale skin and large bags under his eyes, which made it look like his eyes were drooping slightly, giving the impression that he looked a little ill. The pale blonde boy smiled slightly as he looked down at the boy who'd just woken up. "Ah, good, you're finally awake." "What? So you speak English then? Good. That makes things so much easier." The boy with no memory felt nauseous, and when he lifted his head he felt a stinging pain that made it hard to keep his eyes open. However, he managed to sit up and look at the other boy with a perplexed look. "Oh yes, by the way, my name is Paul, and this is my laboratory." Paul gestured with outstretched arms to indicate that the room that they were in was his laboratory. The boy with no memory looked around at the room that he now found himself in. The laboratory was abundant and black in darkness. A single 40-watt bulb hung with a loose wire from the ceiling, held up only by a few staples that someone had haphazardly fired into the ceiling. It illuminated very little, but the boy could just about make out the shapes in the room. It seemed to be an odd collection of ancient and pristinely new-looking electronic bits and bobs that cluttered the room like a museum and a high-tech research facility had crashed into each other in some horrible fiery mess. Bits of wire and broken metal and plastic littered the floor and worktops. The walls were blackened from what looked like had been a fire that happened a long time ago. In contrast to that, there were two futuristic-looking glass metal doors on one side of the room and another larger one on the other side. As well as that, a shiny new-looking cream-coloured CRT computer monitor blinked into life with colourful-looking fish swimming back and forth in an erratic manner. "Laboratory?" asked the boy. Yeah, that is what I said. Are you feeling alright? You seem to be a little slow in the uptake. Perhaps I should do a few tests to see if you're okay." The boy with no memory did not reply. "Right, well, what is your name?" I don't know." The boy with no memory replied, unsure of the question. Oh dear. This isn't good. Not good at all." Paul began to scribble furiously on a notepad which he produced from his pocket. "Second question. Where are you from?" "I don't know." Paul scribbled on his notepad again. "Third question. How old are you?" "I don't know," replied the boy with no memory, getting slightly agitated now by the repetition of his answers. "Jeez." Paul scribbled on his notepad so much that he had to turn a page. The boy leaned forward to peek at Paul's scribblings, but Paul turned away so he couldn't see. I have a question for you, said the boy with no memory. Oh, what's that? How did I get here? To this laboratory of yours? Ah. Paul scrunched up his notepad and froze. Well, you see, that's kind of my fault, Paul said, nervously scratching the back of his head. You see, your being here is kind of a mistake. A mistake? Said the boy, raising one eyebrow. It's not easy, this time-travelling thing, you know. Most people wouldn't even know how to comprehend the logistics of putting such a machine together. And how am I supposed to know which way's in and which way's out and... Whoa. Wait a minute, what are you talking about? Time travel? Yes, time travel. You see, I have dedicated the last few years of my life coupling together a machine for travelling through time in order to... You. Yes, what? You have spent the last how many years building a time machine? About 4 or 5, yes. Why, is there something wrong with that? But you're just a kid. How could a kid like you possibly know how to build a time machine? Just a kid. I happen to be 9 years old, and I'll be 10 in 5 months. That's almost grown up. Besides, I'm very advanced for my age. Rubbish, I don't believe you. It's true, my birthday's in May. Not that. I mean, I don't believe you about the time travel thing. Oh, well, I did have a little help from my dad, I suppose. You mean he did most of the work and you helped? Hardly. No, he built this machine over here for me. Paul walked over to a beaten-up looking machine that was barely holding together, with faded, chipped-off paint, rusted metal and charred electronics hanging together with a small glass door in the middle. The whole thing looked like a giant oven that had lost a fight with a bonfire. The boy got up and wandered to Paul to smirk at the charred abomination that Paul was so proudly admiring. What the hell is that hunk of junk? This is my dad's smart array. The boy flashed a sarcastic look at Paul. Smart array, eh? Yes, replied Paul with enthusiasm. A delightful cheesy name, don't you think? My dad has a great sense of humour. Oh, I'm sure he does. Where is your dad, by the way? Oh, he had to go and do stuff. Business trip or something. He'll be back soon. Anyway, this machine, the Smart Array, had all his knowledge stored onto it. When I was just a baby, he used this machine on me, and all the information which he had stored on the machine was passed on to me. A massive 500 gigabytes of history, science, art and literature. Everything was all transferred into my brain, and I became a genius. Is that so, huh? Looks like a pile of old rubbish, if you ask me. I admit it's seen better days, but I'm sure I could get it working again. Perhaps you'd like to have a go. No, I think I'll pass. What? And pass up the chance of becoming a genius like me? The boy glanced momentarily at the machine before quickly answering. No, I think not using the machine would prove that I'm already intelligent enough. Fair enough, but we don't really know how intelligent you are yet. Actually, just knowing your name would be a good start. I really can't remember anything, yet I know how to talk. I know that I'm a boy, like yourself. That's a pile of rusted junk in the corner. Paul frowned at the implication that the Smart Array was a pile of rusted junk. But other than that, I can't remember anything. Just then monitors blinked into life and electronic noises began to whirl into action. A robotic female voice echoed out of speakers that bounced around the room, making it hard to pinpoint the precise location of its origin. I think he looks like a Colin, said the female voice. What the hell was that? The boy said, looking round the room. That is my custom-built computer AI system, which is wired throughout the laboratory. Designed to provide me with assistance in my work and also to provide me with my social needs, it is just about as smart and as intolerable as any person I've ever met. Say hello, computer, Paul sighed unenthusiastically. I have a name, you know. For the last time, I'm not calling you Simon. Why not? Because you're a female-voiced AI, and Simon's a boy's name. But I like it. Last week you wanted to be called Dave. You're doing this deliberately just to annoy me. When I rebuilt you, I wanted you to be helpful and intelligent so that you could keep me sane and so that you could help me with my time machine. But for the last 3 years, all you've ever done is argue about what your bloody name should be. When I'm finished here, I'll be glad to get away from you and everyone else in this stupid place." Paul and the boy stood awkwardly for a moment in silence. The boy saw his reflection on one of the computer monitors. It looked like he had brown or perhaps very dark blonde hair. The computer broke the silence. "I still think Paul would be a good name for me." "But that's my name!" shouted Paul as his face turned bright red with extreme annoyance. "What about me? What's my name?" said the boy with no memory, feeling a little bit left out. "Oh God, not another one." Paul rested his head in his hands as he felt like he was losing the will to live. And so am I with my bad reading skills. "Hey, I've lost my memory here. Don't you think this is a little bit more serious than arguing with some computer?" Paul took a deep breath and lifted his head again. "You're right, sorry. Let me try to explain what happened. You see, I still think he looks like a Colin." That was the last straw. Paul picked up a rusted metal pole that had broken off the smart array and began to violently connect said metal pole to a computer terminal with extreme force. "Maybe this will teach you to shut up, you retarded load of piss programming and crap components." The violence continued, now with the computer smashed to pieces and sparking wildly. Confused and in a state of shock, it was at this moment that the boy with no name decided to sit down and watch the continued violence on the poor, innocent, defenceless electronics. He sat down in a smelly, worn-out, slightly damp armchair and reflected on all that he could remember had happened in his life so far. All 6 minutes of it. It was about a minute or two later that Paul finally calmed down. Exhausted, he dropped his weapon and leaned against the wall. He gasped for air and smiled in satisfaction, pleased with the destruction he had caused. "So anyway, if you'd like to come in here, I'll show you my time machine." Stepping over the shattered remains of the innocent, defenceless computer which Paul had desecrated in nothing more than a temper tantrum, Colin and Paul made their way into the next room. The room was smaller than the main part of the lab, but a little better lit. Although there were no windows or lights hanging from the ceiling, the light came from various points around the room, illuminating parts of a large object that dominated the room. Bits of strange-looking debris littered the floor surrounding the large object. "Well, there she is," Paul said proudly. Colin gasped as he looked up at the electronic monstrosity that towered before him. The machine was a tall, curved pillar of metal that looked like it had been patched together higgledy-piggledy out of bits and bobs and odd sheets of metal untidily bolted together. The top of the pillar was a mess of thick and thin wires that sprouted outwards like the branches of a tree, but connected to and from the ceiling and other places in a seemingly random manner. Almost in the middle, as the pillar curved, there was a rather comfy-looking leather seat, and protruding from it were 2 flexible metal arms that held a bulky-looking computer monitor on the right and a keyboard on the left. Paul hopped up the somewhat comically small steps that led up to the central seat. He threw his derriere forcefully down into the seat and slouched down with his legs hanging off the side. "Well, what do you think?" he asked. Nice seat," Colin said with uncertainty in his voice. "This is my time machine. Isn't it great?" Directly in front of the seat was a large metal hoop attached to the pillar by the metal base of the machine. Colin had no idea what its purpose was, but he found a use for it as something to lean against. He leaned against the metal hoop like a boss and flashed another of his sceptical, sarcastic looks at Paul. "So you can really travel through time in this thing, eh?" "Well, yes and no. Theoretically, it should travel through time, but in actual fact I haven't so far as to have got it working right yet." "So it's not finished then?" "Actually, you woke up just at the right moment. for I've made a few adjustments and tweaked it slightly since the last time I used it, and I think it will actually work right this time. What happened the last time you used it? Well, I don't really know how to tell you this, but... Yes? I sort of messed up a little. That's why you're here. You did something to me? Instead of creating a portal for the machine to travel through, I accidentally inverted the portal matrix and caused some sort of time-space vacuum thingy that pulled you from your time into my time. Hence all the mess on the floor, as you can see around you. Unfortunately, you must have banged your head on something in the way through, and well, you've been unconscious for the last 3 days. What? 3 days? I'm really sorry. Colin struggled to digest the information that Paul had just vomited out at him. What the hell are you even talking about? Time, space, vacuum thingy? What I'm trying to say is, instead of me travelling with the machine through the portal picked you up and sent you here to my time. Oh, so it's your fault that I have this headache. Thanks. Well, maybe if you weren't so stupid as to get caught in the portal in the first place. Hey, I'm not the one who messed up building this crappy looking thing. Yeah, you wouldn't even know how to build a thing like this because you're too stupid. Well, at least I'm not as stupid looking as you are. Yeah, well, you smell bad, and you're stupid, and ugly. Takes one to know one. A computer voice bellowed out from all sides of the room. Enough of this childishness. Paul, say sorry to Colin. His name isn't Colin, replied Paul. Say sorry. Paul looked down at his shoes guiltily. Sorry. Now, Colin, say sorry to Paul. Why should I? He's the reason I'm here with no memory. Colin? All right. The boy, who was now called Colin, I guess, gave a quick glance up to Paul before his eyes darted back down to look at the floor. Sorry. His reply was almost inaudible. Good. Now you boys behave now. I'm sure you'll get this mess sorted out sooner if you just work together. Bah! I can't wait to dismantle you one day, Paul said, shaking his fist at a random wall speaker. The sooner I get home the better. This place is weird, Colin said. Paul turned round to face Colin sharply. Then let's not waste any more time then. Paul flicked a switch on the keyboard and the machine started to hum. Colin could feel the vibration of the machine through the floor. What? Is it ready to be used? Yes, as I said, I have made a few adjustments to it since the last time I used it, and it is now fully functional. And like you said, the sooner you get home the better. I'm already sick of you. Colin ignored that remark and quickly went to grab hold of the machine. Paul pushed a few more switches and the hum grew louder. Do you know where I came from then? No, but I haven't changed the time coordinates since the last time, so they should be set to the same time zone that you were pulled from. Judging by your clothes, I would say you must be from sometime in the future. I don't recognise the fashion. Colin looked down at his clothes. He hadn't even considered looking at them before. They did look rather strange to him. He was wearing a black t-shirt and blue trousers, but something about them didn't seem quite right. Not like Paul's clothes. Paul was wearing a blue t-shirt and black trousers, which seemed much less odd-looking. Paul typed something into the keyboard and the time machine grew louder still. You sure this is safe? Yes, you'll be fine. Paul pressed a few more buttons and the pillar disconnected from the massive wires attached to the ceiling. Yeah, but you're sure, right? Colin said nervously. Yeah, it's absolutely safe. Paul then put a seatbelt round himself and then another over that, before putting on a pair of safety goggles. Hold on tight. Colin was very worried about the fact that he had no seat, nor seatbelts, or even goggles to make him feel safer. He thought about jumping off the machine, but just then a large bubble surrounded the machine and seemed to make it hover slightly. Oh crap. Colin clenched onto the machine with all his strength, and the metal hoop in front of him sprung into life. An electronic buzzing emanated from the metal hoop as it vibrated violently. Then a flash of light appeared to burst out from under the base of the time machine, like a laser beam cutting through butter. The light seemed to cut a deep hole into the ground that seemed to stretch deep into the depths of the earth. Paul leaned over his seat to get a look at the hole that had appeared under them. He could barely keep his eyes open, but tried to look into the centre of the hole as it stretched deep down, growing further and further into the distance. The hole was not actually burrowing into the ground, but rather creating a portal into a space between space, a tunnel which would transport the boys and the machine almost instantaneously to another time and place. The computer AI watched through a small camera installed on one of the walls as the machine and the two boys inside the protective force bubble were pulled through the portal at lightning speed. Before she had time to process what was going on, the bubble containing the boys and the machine vanished along with the portal. The only thing remaining in the room were the bits of debris from Colin's arrival. 3 days after Colin had arrived, that is all she had left to remember her short-lived friendship with him. She then switched herself off and waited for Paul to return home without Colin. Chapter 2. A Whole Lot of Nothing. What seemed like just a few terrifying seconds passed without event as Paul and Colin found themselves alive in an unknown time and place. It was very quiet, but not in a pleasant way. It was an eerie quiet. Colin lifted his head up to look around, but was nearly blinded by the bright whiteness that surrounded them. Paul had a similar experience, as he took off his safety goggles and was unable to open his eyes for a few moments. Adjusting slightly to the brightness, he looked over at the monitor screen and started tapping away at the keyboard. "Oh good, we actually survived," he said. "You mean you didn't know that we would?" "Well, no, I wasn't sure. But hey, not to worry, we did." Colin sighed in a defeated breath. Paul looked around at the blank whiteness that surrounded them. "So, does this look like home to you?" Well, no, I don't think so. This doesn't seem right." Paul typed away furiously on the keyboard and looked intensely at the monitor. No, this isn't right at all." "You messed up again, didn't you?" Paul ignored Colin and continued to type. No, this is all wrong. We shouldn't be here." "Where are we? Or should I say, when are we?" "I'm not sure. It looks so empty." "Oh, God." "What? Are we dead, maybe? Is this some sort of afterlife?" "Oh, don't be silly, Colin. There is no afterlife." "Oh, great, that makes me feel so much better." Paul leaped out of his chair into what he thought was the ground. "Well, we've established one thing." "What's that?" "Whatever time or place you came from, they couldn't have been very advanced if they still hold on to silly notions of an afterlife. Also, this isn't a floor." "What?" "I'm floating. We're floating." Colin looked down at Paul's feet, floating either above or inside the white blankness. It was hard to tell. Colin moved with trepidation slowly off the machine onto or into the empty void. "Oh, this is weird. What's going on?" "I'm not sure, but to answer your earlier question, I don't think we are anywhere or any time. I think, now this is only a theory, but I think we have somehow gone beyond our universe into a realm where time and space do not exist. How can we exist if nothing exists here? I don't know. I don't understand this. I set the machine to travel in time only, but somehow we've travelled through space into this blank nothing place. This shouldn't happen at all." "Why not?" "Well, despite being able to travel through time and space, I have programmed the time machine always to lock onto the Earth." "Why?" "Well, think about it. If I was to travel, say, 3 days into the future, but only travelled in time and not space, then I would end up in a rather nasty situation floating around in outer space." "How so?" "You see, the Earth is constantly moving around the Sun, so if I was to move in time but not space from my laboratory 3 days or so into the future, Without the machine locking onto the Earth, then the Earth would have moved in space without me, and I would be left in the vacuum of space, finding it a little difficult to breathe. Oh, I see. I have programmed the time machine to always lock onto stable ground for safety. It should not be able to travel away from the Earth, and yet here we are, floating around in this nothing realm, presumably very, very far away from the Earth. Or perhaps we're still near the Earth, but in a space outside and beside the Earth? It's all rather puzzling. I think we should get back on the time machine and try again. Yes, I think that would be a good idea. Although, what? It is an interesting little mystery we have here. We're in a kind of empty void, but somehow we have at least some sort of atmosphere. Well, there must be oxygen, obviously, but whatever the air is here, there appears to be nothing else. It's all very curious. Yeah, that's great and all, but perhaps we could think about it some more when we get back to the lab. Oh yeah, right. Let's get out of here. Paul and Colin turn around to find that the time machine has disappeared. Ah! The time machine. It's gone. How are we going to get back now? Okay, don't panic. It's not recommended to panic in situations like this. Really? Well, what is recommended in situations where you find yourself floating about in an empty void with no way of getting home? Perhaps some breathing exercises, or a nice cup of tea, whatever that is. I wouldn't mind a cup of tea right now. At least I could throw it in your smart arse face. You absolute bastard. This is all your fault. You and your stupid machine. Well, I see you still remember bad words at least. Or perhaps that's all you ever did retain in that stupid thick head of yours. Paul and Colin try to kick and punch each other, but every kick and punch pushes them further away from each other. They soon realise that their efforts to inflict pain on each other are futile. Paul shook his head and spoke. This is no use. We're going to get even more lost like this. You're right. What should we do? Well, it's obvious we need to try and find the time machine. Colin looked around, then suddenly he spotted something below him. Look down there. You're right, there is something down there. It's hard to tell what it is, but could it be the time machine? Well, let's try and find a way to get down there. Colin tried to flap his arms like bird wings, but he didn't seem to be able to move. How do we get down? Haven't a clue. I don't like this feeling of floating around, Paul. Can't you do something to get the time machine back up here? Yes, I agree, it is quite unpleasant. Oh, hang on. What? I've just had a horrible thought. What is it? Well, what if we're not floating? Look at our clothes, they appear to be being pulled upwards, as if the force of gravity is pushing us down. I think we might be falling. Falling? Yes. Let's just hope this really is an empty void, because if it isn't, I think we're going to find out soon if there really is an afterlife. So, should we start screaming? What? What do you want to do that for? Well, that's just what they always do in the movies, right? Start screaming when they fall off of something. Please don't. Alright. But what should we do to pass the time? I don't know. Why don't you just lie back and enjoy the rest of what little life you have left? Well, okay then. Both Paul and Colin lay back with their hands behind their heads, looking up at the white nothingness that they had fallen from. It felt very strange to lie back and relax without something like the ground to support the weight of their bodies. However, they tried their best to get used to it. What is it? I was just thinking. About what? Oh, nothing really. Well, come on, spit it out. It's not like we've got anything else to do. Well, do you think this is going to be painful? What, dying? Yeah, I mean, when we eventually land on whatever it is we're falling to, do you think it'll hurt? Nah, we're falling so far that we'll probably just go splat, and that'll be the end of it. Maybe. Unless what? Unless this falling just goes on and on forever, or at least long enough for us to starve to death. Ah, great, that's a comforting thought. There was a moment of silence as the two boys took in their strange new predicament. Colin? What? If you can't remember anything, how do you know they all start screaming when they fall off of things in movies? I don't know. Lucky guess? An uncertain amount of time passed as the two boys lay back and enjoyed the floaty feeling of falling as they waited for their inevitable deaths. Colin nodded off for a while as he found the sensation of waiting for certain death to be rather dull. A while later he woke up to find that he was still falling, much to his disappointment. "Oh God, are we not dead yet?" "Nope," replied Paul. "Who knew dying could be so boring? Well, why not play a game to pass the time?" "Like what?" "I spy with my little eye something beginning with W." White? Yeah, okay, your turn. Well, let's see here. I spy with my little eye something beginning with P. Oh, is it Paul? Yep. My turn. I spy with my little eye. Is it Colin? Yes! Well, you're good at this game. Have you played it before? I don't remember. Perhaps I'm just a fast learner, Colin said sarcastically. Yes, well, I think we've exhausted the potential of this game, as it seems to be about the only thing there is to spy around here. What should we do now? I don't know. Why don't you go back to sleep? Nah, I'm not really that tired anymore. There was a moment of silence as the two boys fell through the eternal void before Colin had a thought. Can I ask you something? Paul, lying back with his hands behind his head, looked up at Colin to reply. Sure, what is it? Well, I was just wondering, why did you build the time machine in the first place? Paul paused for a moment to carefully consider his answer. I don't know, something to do, I guess. My dad and I have always been interested in history. There are so many mysteries of history that seem like they will never be answered. My dad and I have always had a great interest in any sort of unsolved mystery. As a scientist, one should always question everything. That's what my dad always used to say. Do you think he'll mind that we've managed to get the time machine working and gone off without telling him? Maybe. I'm not too bothered about that. Kinda sad that no one will ever know about my achievements now, though. Eh? Oh yeah, right. The whole falling to our deaths thing. I'd almost forgotten about that. Paul had a sudden thought as he started patting down his clothes. That's odd. You know, as strange as this might sound, I think we may actually be falling upwards. What makes you think that? Well, I can't say I've had an awful lot of experience falling into an empty void, but our clothes don't seem to be behaving the way you would expect if we were falling downwards. Yeah, now that you mention it, I was thinking they were getting a little tight around the front. Maybe we're just falling upside down. Maybe. It's hard to tell in all this white nothingness. That might explain why that thing up there's getting bigger. Eh? What thing? Look up there. There's something up there. Or down there. Maybe it's the ground. I hope it's the ground. Then we can finally die already. Paul squinted his eyes tightly in an effort to make out the object above him. He smiled when he thought he had figured out what they were looking at. Oh, could it be? This might seem a little crazy, but I think that object up there looks an awful lot like the time machine if we were looking at it from the bottom side. Eh? How did it get up there? I thought it was below us. I'm not sure. This void must go round in a loop. I would guess that we've travelled right round back to where we started again. It's getting closer. Here it comes. Get ready to grab hold of it as we pass by. As the two boys floated upwards towards the machine, they got themselves ready, with their hands out wide, ready to grab hold of it. They thudded into the bottom of the machine and struggled to climb up the side of it. Paul struggled to hold on to the steps leading up to the seat. He could feel his body being pulled up off the machine and had to use all his strength to keep his feet on. Colin had less luck and quickly slid off the machine, being pulled up into the void. He managed to grab hold of the monitor arm and struggled to bring himself back down again. Paul got into the seat and clicked his seatbelt into place. Phew, safe at last. Colin was unable to keep his strength up any longer and slid off again, and up into the empty void. Ah! Oh, stop being so dramatic. You're not in the movies, you know. As Colin slowly drifted upwards and away from the machine, he looked down at Paul, annoyed. What the hell do you want me to do? I've just fallen up into an empty void. Relax, you'll get another shot at it next time you come round. Don't worry, I'll wait here for you. Gee, thanks. I'll see you in a few hours then. Yeah, see you later. Uncaringly, Paul did not look back up at Colin and proceeded to load up a game on the time machine's computer monitor. After several hours had passed, Paul got a sudden shock when he heard a loud thud come from under the machine. Moments later, he saw the exhausted-looking Colin struggling to climb up the side of the machine. So, how was your trip? Paul inquired. I don't want to talk about it. Amazing. I was timing how long it would take you to get back here. It seems that this whole void is so small that it can be travelled through in just 3 hours and 45 minutes. Isn't that funny? Hilarious, Colin said bitterly. He couldn't have cared less as he breathlessly struggled to hold on to the machine. Just been playing some Gallagher. Managed to beat my previous high score. Paul, yes? I don't care. Just shut the hell up and get us out of here already. I can barely hold on much longer, and I don't want to go through this void a third time. Alright. But don't you think it's amazing? I mean, here we are. Paul! Okay, I'm doing it already. Paul started up the machine. To Colin's relief, he saw the protective bubble appear around them, and before they knew it, they were being pulled away from the empty void into some other time and place. So that is the end of part 1 of Lab Rats, the whole story. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you come back to listen to part 2, where I shall be reading chapter 3 and onwards. Goodbye.